Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, some good, some bad, some simply beyond this realm. The tales you are about to hear are the untold stories of those who entered the shadows, perhaps against their own will. These are the Terror Tapes. Terror Tapes, Episode 1. Taken. After months of wedding chaos, they set off on a serene weekend camping trip, a remote countryside escape where cell signals faltered and the only voices belonged to nature. It suited them. Both were avid outdoors people, always drawn to open skies and rugged terrain, though lately their connection felt strained. In truth, it wasn't the fresh air that had Sarah looking forward to the trip. It was the hope that this time alone might reset things. She had forgotten how Mark's eyes seemed to linger uncomfortably long towards her bridesmaid Heather as they stood at the altar. When Sarah had teased him about it after the ceremony, Mark dismissed it immediately, brushing her off with a quick, "Don't be ridiculous." She dropped it, unwilling to shatter their perfect day. But the memory lingered like a splinter, and now the silence between them stretched just a little too long. As they sat by the fire that first night, the sky seemed infinite, stars scattered like confetti over black velvet. "Isn't it beautiful? I feel like I could stare at it all night," Mark said endearingly. "Yeah," Sarah agreed. Then before she could stop herself, "Staring's her specialty." Mark shoots Sarah a look. "Do you really want to bring this up right now?" Sarah swallowed hard, forcing a half-choked laugh. "Forget it. You're right, I think I'm just tired. We did a lot of hiking." A breeze rolled in and dead leaves scattered, forming almost a perfect circle around them before flying too high and flowing away. Before either could continue, a sudden crack of thunder split the quiet sky, forcing them to jump out of their skin. The sky erupted and torrents of rain downpoured, causing them to retreat into their tent quickly. "There wasn't even an inkling of a flash storm like that," Mark said, puzzled as the newlyweds rolled out their sleeping bags and prepared to call it a night. "I guess that's why it's called a flash storm," Sarah replied as she snuggled into her sleeping bag. Despite being exhausted, Sarah felt uncertain. Not just about the storm, but everything. Mark, the rain, and the thunderous clap snapping them out of their dreamlike honeymoon. Was it a sign, she thought? No, not now, not on the honeymoon. She wasn't going to let her uncertainties ruin their honeymoon, even if the weather was miserable, because nothing was unbearable as long as Mark was by her side. She felt safe with him, at home and whole. She knew as long as they were together, they'd wade the storms, literally and figuratively. Sarah closed her eyes and rolled closer to Mark, who was turned away and fast asleep. Sarah decided to let the rainfall ease her to sleep, but she struggled to nod off because the raindrops hitting the tent seemed to stop, but the rain still sounded like it was falling on the surrounded ground. A low hum, so deep it seemed to vibrate her bones, rose above the rain. The noise felt alive, and it was like pressing down on them. Sarah sat up, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Before Mark could respond, a powerful gust of wind shook the tent, collapsing part of it inward. Then, silence. Total silence. Sarah's pulse quickened. The hum persisted, louder now, thrumming like it was inside her skull. "Mark," she whispered. "What's happening?" Mark unzipped the tent flap, crawling outside. Sarah followed, her breath catching as she looked up. Hovering just above the clearing, a massive saucer-shaped craft loomed, metal glistening unnaturally in the moonlight. Rainwater dripped upward, suspended in the air around it like an invisible force was pulling it toward the ship. Sarah couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened. Mark reached for her, his face twisted in panic. I can't," she wheezed. The hum turned into a deafening roar from the center of the saucer. A blinding white light exploded downward. Sarah screamed as her body left the ground, her limbs flailing against the impossible pull. Reaching for Mark, Sarah cried, but all the air seemed to be squeezed out of her lungs. The couple watched as the ground grew further from their feet, and the light became more blinding by the second until their understanding of life as they knew it suddenly snapped to black. Sarah woke to the stench of antiseptic. Her skin was cold, hard metal pressed against her back. She opened her eyes slowly. A harsh, sterile light seared her vision. She tried to move, but her wrists and ankles were strapped down. Even worse, she noticed she was stripped naked, making her feel vulnerable to this new, unknown environment. "Mark," she whispered. From her peripheral vision, she saw him on the table beside her. His head lolled to one side, mouth slacked as if he were still unconscious. Sarah strained against the straps, her breathing shallow and erratic. Then, movement. Against the black background, she could see silhouettes of humanoid figures, but their figures weren't quite as human as one would imagine. Their heads were long and narrow, along with the rest of their bodies. Sarah, caught speechless, watched his long gray arms emerge from the dark. Slender and sinewy, they moved like a coiled wire being pulled straight. The skin glistened like wet leather, smooth and hairless. Sarah whimpered as the arms reached for her, brushing against her face and limbs, their stinging touch feeling like her raw skin contacting dry ice. The creature's hand poked and yanked, their touch deliberate but foreign. She screamed as one pulled at her hair, then another gripping her wrist hard enough that it felt like her bones might snap. From somewhere in the dark, a strange voice chattered in a garbled, unintelligible language. Occasionally she heard an English word, human, observe, but they passed among fleeting whispers. The few English words she could recognize sent Sarah down a mental spiral, struggling to understand who these people were, or rather, what they were. Then the masks came. A long, veiny, dark, and flesh-like cable lowered down from the ceiling like a spider, with a wide mask that had teeth-like tips extending from each side hovering over Sarah's face. Sarah thrashed as the rubbery mask plopped onto her chest and curled up her body using the tips. "No, stop!" she screamed. Harsh, sulfuric air flowed into her mouth and then began burning her lungs. She looked up and saw something crawling down the cable from the inside, working its way closer to the mask until it reached her mouth. She panicked, trying to see something, but it wasn't until she felt whatever was in the cable touch her tongue and then crawl around her mouth. It felt like a bug with 1,000 legs running around her mouth and eventually down her throat. A crawling sensation spread through her chest and stomach like centipedes slithering through her veins. "Mark!" she sobbed, but her muffled cries did nothing as Mark only woke up when a creature crawled down the cable and through his mask covering. She turned her head to look at him, only to freeze in horror. The thing beneath Mark's skin moved. His stomach bulged outward, unnatural shapes rolling beneath the surface as his stomach began to inflate like a balloon before... Pop! The skin split open, blood shot across the room, entrails spilled onto the table in slick crimson ropes. The hum gibberish among the humanoids picked up in the background, never breaking higher than a hum. Sarah's mind shattered until she looked down to see the creature crawling up and down her legs and feet, then working its way up to her stomach from the inside. She could feel the creature growing in real time as it clawed and teared its way around Sarah's intestines. As the creature grew, it started to inflate her stomach just like Mark's. Her panic grew as she wrenched and thrashed against the restraints until pop! Her stomach exploded and the world tilted sideways as a piercing ringing bounced around her head and then blacked out. Sarah's eyes snapped open and she shot upright, gasping for air. The forest was silent. The tent surrounded her, intact and dry. The ground was soft beneath her. Mark lay beside her, snoring lightly. The crickets chirped in the background and a slight breeze swayed among the trees. She looked under her sleeping bag and felt her stomach in complete tact, and no signs of trauma. No sign of creatures. "Mark!" she cried, violently shaking him awake. "What?" he groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Sarah, what's wrong?" The ship, the creatures!" Mark sat up, frowning. "The hell are you on about now?" "You're probably dreaming. Just go back to sleep." "No, I swear Sarah." "Sleep." Mark sighed, rolling away from her. "You're acting needy again." Sarah's gaze stared off for 1,000 miles as she felt like the only one in the world again. She unzipped the tent, stepping outside. The clearing was peaceful. The sky was clear, full of stars once more. No rain, no ship, nothing. She lay back down, her heart rate not slowed for a second. There was no way that this was just a dream. That was too surreal. A week later, they still hadn't spoken about it. Sarah tried to bring it up, but Mark refused every time, brushing her off with hollow reassurances or the occasional backhanded comment. Ever since returning from the trip, Mark grew more distant. Entire days pass where he doesn't speak a word or even leave their home. Sometimes Sarah doesn't even know if he's breathing. One night, Sarah found him sitting in the dark corner of their living room, his face turned to the wall. She couldn't do this anymore, the isolation. She felt cut off and lonely in her own house, and this wasn't how she intended the beginning of her marriage to go. "Mark," she demanded, but Mark didn't budge. He just kept staring into nothing. "Hello? Anyone there?" Mark's silence fueled the rage that was growing within Sarah. Sarah threw a glass cup across the room, crashing against the wall beside Mark, but he still didn't move. Not even after his shattered glass baptism. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted. Mark didn't move. "Ever since our honeymoon, you've been completely distant, constantly insisting that I'm just the one making up things while you stare off into oblivion for hours. I'm not crazy, you're crazy." Mark doesn't turn around, but Sarah can hear him manically whispering to himself. "What?" Sarah asked, shocked to hear he finally said something. Anything. She walks over to him. What are you saying?" His whispering doesn't stop, and as Sarah steps closer, his unintelligible whispering gets quicker. "Mark?" She slows her pace and slowly raises her hand. As she's about to touch him, he replies, "Who's Mark?" in a voice deep and gargled, almost like he's got fluid in his lungs. She takes a step back from him. Mark whips around, revealing a mangled face with his bottom jaw unhinged and stretched down to his chest. His eye sockets filled without eyeballs, but black holes with blood gushing out. Sarah scrambles backwards as Mark stands up and watches as his body begins to morph and change, getting taller, with his head becoming more elongated and flesh glossing over to a smooth, wet, gray, leathery texture. Sarah screams as she watches the person who was her husband morph into the very creatures who occupied her lucid dream. She takes off towards the door, struggling to twist the knob from her fear and sweaty hands as the alien creature extends their hands towards her. Panicked, she gets the door open and can't get out quick enough, tripping over her own feet that can't keep up with her desire to move. She stumbles to the ground, and when she gets up, she finds herself in a dark room. "Hello?" A single interrogative light source shoots down on top of her, and she finds herself back in the sterile room, surrounded by the humanoid aliens she encountered in her dream. Dozens of their arms extend towards her as they force her onto the table and strap her down despite her fighting and thrashing. One of the aliens rips her shirt off, revealing a massive pregnant belly that wasn't there before. As Sarah screams and resists, she feels movement in her stomach until finally the same movement works its way up her stomach and through her neck and then starts swirling around her head. The movement is agonizing, especially as she starts to see her own skin changing and feels her head elongating and extending as well. Finally, her screams fall to silence, and all that's heard is the humming. And that concludes another journey into the dark world of the Terror Tapes. If you enjoyed the terror, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join our growing legion of fear seekers, and together we'll explore the darkest corners of the unknown. Until next time, stay haunted.